But in this post-COVID world, I certainly think that everyone listening in will be able to relate to a sort of sense of urgency and, you know, sheer volume of work, the sort of work-life balance. It's challenging for everyone right now. So as we pursue particularly difficult problems, and as we try and, you know, tackle things that will never be easy, and as we try and think about doing that in virtual teams, how do we create a fun environment? How do we celebrate the small wins along the way? Because otherwise we're not going to make it.
Hi, I'm Shannon Lucas.
And I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And we're the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to catalyzing innate change makers to accelerate positive change. This is our podcast,
Move Fast, Break Shit, Burnout,
where we highlight catalysts that are creating amazing change in the world. In this season of the podcast, we're doing a deep dive into the skills that make catalysts successful. And I'm super excited to have here today Jennifer Goldsack. She founded and serves as CEO of Dime, a nonprofit dedicated to advancing digital medicine to optimize human health. Jennifer worked at Citi, a public-private partnership co-founded by Duke and the FDA. She spent 5 years in research at the University of Pennsylvania Hospital and Outcomes Research in the Department of Surgery and the Department of Medicine. She has helped launch the Value Institute, a pragmatic research and innovation center in Delaware-based academic medical center. She's on the steering committee. She was going to be modest. She didn't have this included in her bio when she sent it to me. She's on the steering committee at the World Economic Forum's Digital Health Action Alliance, and she has earned her master's in chemistry from the University of Oxford, England, that one, master's in the history and sociology of medicine from UPenn, and an MBA from George Washington University. So good to have you with us today, Jen.
Great to be with you.
All right, let's jump right in. She's traveling, she's on the road, she's getting stuff done. Would love to start off by hearing how you relate to the concept of catalysts.
Well, that's always a really good question to ask a recovering chemist. So I'm going to take us back to first principles. I'm going to take us back to chemistry. The definition of a catalyst, if we're thinking from a chemical perspective, is an agent that powers and speeds other reactions without being changed themselves. And I love that as a sort of North Star. I have sort of spent my life in team sports in a previous life, and now sort of professionally having the privilege of leading some really tremendous teams, really trying to change the way we care for people, trying to harness the power of digital innovation to change the way that we practice medicine, make it accessible to everyone, make it more equitable, sort of creating a price point that individuals and society can afford. So the way I relate to this is, what can I do? How can I bring myself and my skills to this transformation that is happening? How can I make it better? How can I make it more impactful? How can I make it happen faster? And how can I make it easier and sort of support all of those people around me and in this process in order to get that done? So yes, taking it back to chemical first principles, but I think it still works.
And tying it through your life in all the ways. I love it. That's amazing. All right. So 1 to 2 skills. Clearly you're successful. You're helping sort of lead the revolution of this industry. What has made you successful as a catalyst? Maybe with some stories about what have made you successful. And maybe there were times that you didn't have them, that you failed.
Oh gosh, well, we're not going to start there because we'll be there all day. Let's start with some skills. I think one of the things that we were chatting about, Shannon, before we hit record, your son was a rower for a while, and I actually had the privilege of rowing at the Olympic Games in 2008. So a very painful sport, a pretty miserable sport, and one where team is at the heart of everything. You're only as fast as sort of the weakest link, and so you have to be as good as you can be. You also have to figure out how to make everyone around you as good as possible. And I think that is a lot of what a lot of those sort of skills, maybe mindset that I bring to the table. How am I doing my best while simultaneously supporting everyone around me with the courage to try something new, with a belief that things are possible, and sort of supporting their skills, their development in order to get things done. So I think about that often, the skills of, you know, sort of the team. I also think, you know, rowing's an interesting sport because there's an Olympic Games every 4 years, there's a World Championships every year, there are 3 World Cups a year, and outside of that, there's really not much else. And yet you manage to train 6 or 7 hours a day. So there's a lot of work that goes on in the shadows for these, fleeting moments where you actually get to perform. And so I think, not being afraid of hard problems and tenacity is actually, right there. It's just, we dig in. The hard work is the way we get this done. And our differentiator is, it's not a sometimes I think there's a false dichotomy between, you can be smart and then you don't have to go as hard. And I'm like, I don't know. I think we've got to be smart and go hard. So I think bringing that experience to the table has been important. And then the last one from a positive perspective is it doesn't have to be fun to be fun. And we all work really hard. I think we find ourselves, and I'm constantly surprised by this actually, Shannon, by how hard we are all working right now. I don't know whether there will be a readjustment in some sort of future state, but in this post-COVID world, I certainly think that everyone listening in will be able to relate to a sort of sense of urgency and sheer volume of work, the sort of work-life balance. It's challenging for everyone right now. So as we pursue particularly difficult problems, and as we try and tackle things that will never be easy, and as we try and think about doing that in virtual teams, how do we create a fun environment? How do we celebrate the small wins along the way? Because otherwise we're not going to make it. And there was a former competitor of mine actually on the Canadian team who had the tagline, "It doesn't have to be fun to be fun." And somehow I've managed to pull that forward. And at the Digital Medicine Society or DIME, I have a really wonderful set of colleagues that I have the privilege of working with daily. And because of how we're positioned in the field, we are a convener first and foremost. We work with hundreds of leading organizations from around the world every day. And it's the people who step up and they want to change the world too. So even when we're doing hard things, we figure out how to make it fun.
So much to unpack there. I'll start with the last point, which is, we talk a lot about the importance of celebration on the journey of Catalyst for a couple of reasons. And one is because we'll set a vision that seems impossible at the beginning, but largely because of the hard work that you're talking about and our tenacity, we can blow past that without having stopped to look in the rearview mirror and be like, we actually just accomplished in 6 months what we thought would be impossible in a year or whatever that looks like. So the importance of celebration to remind that, but also the importance of the celebration of the journey.
100%. So, you asked for specific stories and maybe I'll give you two. I think the first is, more specifically, the mindset that we try and live both as a team at DIME, but with our partners. We do so much pre-competitive collaboration. So we're working with these organizations. It's much easier to keep your foot on the gas when you actually have a pretty rapid positive feedback loop and feedback cycle, right? If you're able to actually say, gosh, we're putting it out there. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but working our ass off, we're doing all of these things.
Yeah, you're all good.
Okay, good, right? Safe space. Not backing down from the hard problems, and you get those wins. You get that positive reinforcement that, okay, we're chipping away at this. Yes, we're going to celebrate this, and yes, we're going to recognize that, and yes, we're going to say heck yeah, and yeah, we're going to keep going. And you actually use that as a way to fuel you. I think that's really excellent. And I'm going to counter that, and it's not a failure, not by any stretch of the imagination, but when I reflect on my athletic career, the greatest regret I have is that I really wish I'd enjoyed it a little bit more. I was so intense the whole time, and you're younger, and so when you try and be sort of professional and focused, going back to what we said about being a catalyst, you don't change yourself, but you show up in a way. You'd win a trial or you break a record on the rowing machine, like all of things that I did many times. You win a medal at the World Championships, you qualify for the Olympics. Every single time I was so hard on myself. I was like, well, you qualified for the Olympics, but you haven't done anything yet. And you haven't won it yet. You won this World Championships medal. You're like, was it gold? Or, when I did win gold medals, it was like, great, but it's all building towards the games. And I felt like I never took those moments. And I could have enjoyed it so much more. And that's not to say it wasn't a wonderful experience, but like I had exceptional teammates, did amazing things, traveled the world, like raced these like individuals who I've continued to keep in touch with over the course of my sort of adult life and career. And it's just like, I wish I just, not to come off the gas, not to take any of it less seriously, but I just wish I'd taken a beat to actually enjoy it and to celebrate it with the people you're on the journey with. And so I've really pulled that forward. And it's something that I absolutely insist upon and frequently remind myself is absolutely key. And I think it's why our team is able to do as much as we are. We're, you know, a scrappy team of innovators, but we work with these enormous sort of organizations. We work with government agencies. And I think it's because we're able to sort of bring everyone with us, because it's hard work, but we make it fun and we celebrate those moments. It always feels like we're moving in the right direction. And that's really served me and teams I've been lucky enough to be a part of subsequently.
I'd love to double click on this. And I really appreciate, we haven't really on the podcast had people, we talk about burnout, right? That's in the title of the book, but we don't talk about the thing that is before that, which is the hard work.
Yep.
And I would love for you to talk about, I guess, first, because I have a bunch of questions, but like, how do you operationalize that in your own life? I'm guessing because there's the put your own oxygen mask on before you can do it with your team. And then how do you operationalize that with your team? I think like helping Catalyst, because we're so bad at this, like help us get really concrete about what that looks like.
So I would say there's a few things, and I'm going to say things that maybe don't sound terribly healthy. And I'm going to also openly share that, like, I've thought about this a lot about whether these things are healthy, but I've been lucky enough to really, you know, work really hard throughout my professional career and actually manage to avoid burnout. One of the things, and I think this is a sort of asshole athlete competitor in me, is like, one of my superpowers is that I've got a really big gas tank. Like, I wasn't technically the most proficient when I was an athlete, but boy, I could on a day off, I could do an extra session and I wouldn't fall over. Like I could do, you know, I didn't need a nap every afternoon. I could watch video. Things like that has always been like my ability to sort of outwork the competition is, to my mind, one of my differentiators. And it's challenging as a leader sometimes, because what I also don't want to do is create an environment where that's what we need to compete around, but it's more, how do we create an environment where you recognize your superpowers and you really lean into them, and you have the permission to say, this doesn't work for me, and your stock is sufficiently high, you're sufficiently trusted to be able to lean into that. So from a personal perspective, you know, as long as I'm having fun, I can do anything. And like, that's my fuel. As long as I feel like I'm making a difference, as long as I feel like I'm doing something important, that's what I need. Like, that's my sunshine and water, right? To get me through the day, like a good pot plant. Then when I think about how we do that with the team, there's two things. One of the things that I try and do often, when I screw up, I say, I screwed up, or that was a bad decision and I'm sorry. One, because I think that's really important to create a safe space where someone else can say, yeah, I screwed that up. Like, which is not to say, you know, let's all be sloppy, but like to remind people that we all make mistakes and it's okay, and you own it and you sort of move forward. And I think that gives people a lot more sort of latitude to push. The flip to that is to really celebrate even the small things. And one of, like, our team, for example, we've got, this is going to sound silly, but I love it. We've got a team hype private Slack channel. There are 3 or 4 things that go in there every day, and teams are recognizing one another all the time. And so we, when we screw up, right? If you have to eat shit, don't nibble. You screwed up, own it. You know, ask for help. Don't hide. Figure it out.
Yeah.
And then when you kill it, like, recognize your teammates, celebrate them, and then everyone benefits from that halo effect because they are celebrated too. Everyone is seen. Everyone is recognized. And because we are a mission-driven organization, we work really hard as a leadership team to relate everyone's job to the mission. Right? Yeah. We are an organization that exists to really harness the power of digital innovation to improve lives. So whatever your job is, we can connect those dots. And we actually talk about that a lot as a leadership team. And when we are recognizing people, it's not generic. It's not just a great job. It is, let's also make that crosswalk between your achievement today, or that behemoth of a task that you just dug through, whether it's like our financial audit or whether it is, a website redesign or whatever that looks like, tie it back to the mission. Like, this is the work we do. This is the hard work we do every day. We are trying to support innovators around the world to develop these new innovative digital solutions because we are here to better care for people. We are here to improve and save lives. And that also really helps too. And I think why I've often found myself in sort of mission-driven organizations and roles.
Yeah, that was where I was landing, like the thread that I hear for you personally, and then how that's manifesting for the team and the people that you work with is like, you are a hard worker. You have the tank, you can go, but the part that shifts, it sounds like for you, and maybe, help me if I'm getting this wrong, the part that shifts the mindset about like the younger you, where you're just going, and you're not enjoying the ride or the journey, is you're connecting this spaciousness that the mission gives you, right? And so there's this energy exchange. And what I hear you say with the team, which is really smart, and like we try and help more leaders do this, which is connect your people to the purpose.
100%. 100%. And I mean, and that's it. And it's also good to remind ourselves, because I think it's so easy, especially going back to what we were talking about earlier, everyone is working really hard. And it's this idea of, hard and smart and hard and with purpose. And I think that's part of it too. And if we can remind people, all of us get blinkered, get a little bit head down these days, I think every time you say to someone else, good job, you did X, Y, Z, and I can immediately tell you how that is going to affect A, B, and C, you're reminding yourself, oh yeah, I have a great team and everyone's a rock star. And by the way, we're all doing ABC all day. This is great. Right?
Totally.
Even a long work day, and even at the end of a day that maybe wasn't that great. It's a nice reminder that like there's a bigger picture, and like net, we're winning.
It resonates with me super personally, because we're in a mode right now where we are working around the clock. I mentioned like Tracy couldn't be here. She's in, in New York delivering. And I have other people in my lives who may work at the same sort of amplitude or power that I'm working at. Intensity is the word that I was looking for, but that aren't connected. It doesn't serve or connect with that person, that personal mission. It's like, we may put in the same hours, but I feel like my reserve tank is more full, because every day pretty much we get letters about lives that we've changed, or we can see the impact of the most recent course and how that's changed lives. And like, that is, it is sustaining. But there's one more question. I know we're going a little bit long in this section, but I'm super curious to hear what you think, especially given the breadth of background and how many people in different contexts you work with. Why are we working so much harder and more right now, certainly post-pandemic? Do you have an opinion on that?
I've thought about it a lot. I think opinion is a stretch. I have maybe a hypothesis, which is, I think that especially, and I work in healthcare. So I think that it was really scary there for a long time. And I think that anyone who could help did. And I think we all dug in. We've all moved to these sort of fully virtual, or many of us have sort of virtual environments. And so boundaries got blurred, and an intensity sort of came to the fore. And I think we haven't quite figured out how to take the treadmill back down to a 7 or an 8 from a 10 without just eating it, right? Without falling off. As a leader, I'm looking, and we're now experiencing some economic headwinds. It's not a crisis. I tried to find a job straight after the Beijing Olympics in the fall of 2008. That wasn't a fun time to be looking for. It is not that, but there are definitely some economic headwinds. And so you then think about, well, gosh, how can we create more space? But you're also looking for, but I need to maintain a P&L over here. Like, I don't have 20% of capacity, which, like, looking in the whites of people's eyes, ideally would be really nice, including, our own, but we just don't see it. And so I think we're in this, what I hope is a stutter step, where we've collectively recognized the problem. And before we sort of have we're already seeing a burnout crisis among our clinical colleagues. And after what they went through during the pandemic, that's no surprise. And if we all continue like this, I think we're going to see it in more industries. I certainly have enough conversations with sort of colleagues across in leadership positions across different industries. We're all very cognizant of it now. And I think we're all tracking and trying to think about different ways to be creative. One of the other things that we certainly do at our organization, back to this sort of boundary issue, is reminding everyone on the team that they are actively encouraged to manage their boundaries. And so we, even over the last few years, have had to introduce things that might seem silly, but in order to sort of protect yourself and protect your time. Like, I went back and said, we use Slack as a platform. We even have a different selection of emojis that actually signal in a remote environment, like what you need in that time. Like, mark your calendar. If there is a yoga class that you love to do on a Tuesday, or if you want to go and read with your son's class on a Thursday morning, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And people who work everywhere. And when you are doing things like that, that might be then a choice. I'm going to take the morning, but I'm going to work in the evening. Because you get an email in the evening does not mean that you have to respond to it in that moment. And again, like, one of the other drivers I think of perhaps some perceived sort of work rate, work volume, inability to really turn off from work is the virtual environment leads to more flexibility. That is an absolute gift if it is well managed. If you don't feel like you can turn off because someone else on your team is working, that's an unhealthy work environment. And that, I think, very quickly can also make you feel like you should be working all the time, which fuels this sort of sense of urgency that we were just talking about.
Yeah, and if it sounds like you and I are probably both like hard work addicts, and so like it's not a great, it doesn't help that propensity. You're like, oh, I can continue doing it. All right, I would love to pick your brain more. I think that'd be a super awesome rabbit hole to go down. But I do want to know, what are some of the biggest challenges right now for you as a Catalyst leader? Maybe it was everything we just talked about, but
it's interesting for us in our market. When we think about sort of innovation in healthcare, we are definitely in the depths of the post-COVID hangover, if you like. And so experiencing real fatigue. And it's somehow or other, everyone in that industry, quite literally survived that crisis, and they were exposed to trauma, I think, that is real. It dramatically changed budget projections, strategic projections, and now this is sort of proliferation of technology. And we exist as an organization because we believe deeply in the promise of these sort of digital technologies and innovations to really change and transform the way that we care for people, to address some of the most pressing and persistent challenges that we've sort of battled as an industry for a long time. But, there's a reason why healthcare is a $4.3 trillion domestic industry, as a $10.5 trillion international industry, is the last big industry to digitize. Because it's hard, and we are going to have to reimagine what some of these workflows are. We are going to have to change incentives. We do not have sufficient skills in the workforce. And that is all just keeping people's heads up while we go through this process, when you're already starting in the back foot, I think is the greatest challenge. I don't think anyone is debating the need for this to happen. I don't think anyone is resistant to this change or has a bad attitude, but it's almost you take a big breath at the beginning of the day and you're like, it's going to be struggle enough to get from start to finish doing all the things that we've already done before we try and layer this in. So, that I even feel almost guilty describing it as a challenge, because that makes it sound like there's a criticism, but it's a tough environment. It's a tough environment to ask people to step up and lean into something new, because it will return to you. That lag between the work that has to happen today, back to the feedback cycle, it's going to take a bit, and it's hard to justify that now.
I can literally feel, like, as you're talking about that, this like weight. We talk a lot about how you have to bring other people along when you're in an organization creating change. That was easier 5 years ago than it is now. And for all the reasons that we talked about, like there's this work, we don't even understand still where all of that is coming. But regardless, like even if you're working normal hours, the change fatigue with the politics and the wars and like it's never ending. But then you're like, and then you just spent 3 years on the front line. And I'm just like, and having people in my family who work in the medical profession, and then like asking them, even if they're change friendly, like do one more thing different today. You're just like, dude, I'm here, I'm showing up, that's all I got.
Well, and Shannon, it's horrendous. But yes, there are two wars right now, and there's these sort of climate disasters, and it just, sometimes when you're trying to rally communities and teams to sort of embrace change, it can all feel, I don't criticize anyone who might just throw up their hands and say, what's the point? Like it just feels a little bit too hard. And you turn on the news or you listen to whatever it is, and it's just harrowing, and trying to get people sort of excited and motivated. And the kinds of transformational change that we are talking about requires sustained effort. And it's just, it's a lot right now. And so how can we figure out how to be kind to people and to create space and to maybe have a conversation as a professional team about, shit's pretty bad out there. And if you need to, like, feel free to bring that up, like with your supervisor, with a colleague, whatever that looks like. Even just, I think, acknowledging it so that people say, okay, good, I'm not the only crazy person who's like turning up to work and looking left and looking right, and like, why are we behaving like everything's fine after,
all the things, totally. Yeah. Those are all amazing suggestions. So I hear creating space, normalizing it, the self-compassion and the empathy for the others in your orbit. Is there anything, are there any other tools for people who are at that level of exhaustion and, I don't even have another word for it, spentness, whatever that is? Are there any other tools that you that you've been using?
I mean, to roll it all up, I think what we can ill afford to do as leaders in this environment is stick our heads in the sand when we start to see signals, right? I think that creates, or that risks creating, irreparable damage and erosion of capabilities and the health, quite literally, of your, like, in terms of productivity, but also quite literally the health of your team. And I think, encouraging the leadership team around you, if you see something, say something. Every single one-on-one I have with my direct reports is my first question, and I usually do it in a joking fashion, but often to keep things light. How's morale? And then our leadership stand-ups are, we always start with team morale. Like, guys, like, first and foremost, like, let's start here. What are we doing? And it's a silly thing, but this team that I have the privilege of leading at Dime works very hard, and we do a couple of times a year we close the office, and that is, that's not vacation. That is, you come back from the break and there are no emails because no one else has been.
Right.
You don't have to dig out, and you don't have to do handoff because we're just closing, and we do that over the winter break. The last 2 years we've done it over the July the 4th week, and then we do a couple of days at then Thanksgiving. And we're at a bit of a loss as a leadership team when a whole new wave of sort of tragedy sort of kicked off, and it was a silly thing, but we were just like, screw it, let's just do extra day or two over Thanks. Just I don't know what we can do to help, but let people figure out what they need. I don't care if they sit and look at the wall. I don't care if it's family time, whatever it is, but like, let's actually give people the ability to make that decision for themselves about what they need. And the net of losing a day or two is neither here nor there.
Totally. And I hate to put it in the cynical terms, but the productivity or the energy, or whatever you want, when you come back is better. It's actually a good investment. Thank you. And it's a good reminder as well. So yeah. All right. We're going to move into the fun part.
Okay.
You ready for the rapid fire?
This has all been fun, but now
it has been fun. But we're gonna lighten it a little bit. Okay. What do you do to get ready for a big meeting?
Well, if I wanted to be a real jerk, I'd say put on a proper shirt and go to the bathroom quickly. But what in our days of back-to-back Zoom meetings, what do we do? What's my definition of success? I think I don't like to over prepare for these things, because I feel like oftentimes if it's a really important meeting, you might get a curveball. It might not go the way you want, but like, what is your definition of success? And then being light on your feet, keeping that in mind. And regardless of, what's being said, the conversations that are happening, the data that's being presented, you might have to do a massive course correct on how you thought the conversation might go, or even what the decision is, but what is the goal? And having that as a North Star, I think gives you, it stops you from being knocked off your feet.
Love it. What's your favorite way to spend one of those free days?
Oh, what? I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
So outside and sweaty, sunshine, sweat. That's it.
That's a good recipe. Yeah, in all the ways. I love it. And favorite, this is, again, always stumble over this one. Favorite famous catalyst there, alive or dead, and why?
Serena Williams.
Cool.
I think first female athlete to top the earnings charts of athletes, which I think is extraordinary. I mean, tremendous athlete, also a brilliant businesswoman. She went back to her sport, really broke ground on what I think sort of mothers are able to do sort of physically. And then if you look at what she's doing, I mean, she also had all kinds of health issues. We talk about, health equity, and maternal mortality statistics in the US. She is living proof of exactly why we struggle with that problem. And she did not stay quiet. She has been a bold advocate. She has put herself out there. And now if you look at some of the investments and things she's making in her sort of retirement as an athlete, really championing sort of female founded organizations, sort of minority run organizations, women's health organizations, really sort of focusing on taking all of her superpowers and trying to really leave the world a substantially better place than she found it previously, by inspiring us all through her sort of career as an athlete, and now by building things that are even better than when she found them. So I think she's just absolute baller.
She is. She's so badass. And the power that she, like any screen, whether she's on the court or off, is just like the power that she sits in is awesome.
100%.
All right. Call to action for our listeners.
Just keep going. I mean, it's just keep going. There are going to be days where we're sprinting forward, and there are going to be days where we're crawling. And we're all, anyone I think who would describe themselves as an innovator or maybe even a catalyst, as that's our focus here. There are going to be days where it feels really hard, and there are going to be days where like the wins are massive. Focus on the wins. Keep going. And back to my nerdy, perhaps chemist's definition of a catalyst. A catalyst remains unchanged. And so, don't come back damaged, broken, scarred, and bring your own superpowers, not someone else's, to the table as we try and drive all of this forward.
Amazing, Jen. Thank you so much for this conversation. Conversations like this are the ones that give me energy to keep powering through. So I really appreciate this conversation.
Terrific, Shannon. This has been great. Thank you for having me.
To our listeners, thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about how to accelerate positive change, go to our website at catalystconstellations.com. Of course, be sure to check out our book, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, The Catalyst Guide to Working Well. And if you have other catalysts in your life, hit the share button and send a link their way. Thanks again.